that we acquire through knowledge and understanding through thought and experience. And it exists well-established tasks and training to increase cognitive abilities, but it's difficult to motivate people to keep doing these tasks in a regular basis, and that's why we gamify those tasks. And brain games are designed to raise long-term cognitive health, but the extrinsic reward, it rarely occurs immediately, and the benefits of long-term is difficult for individuals to perceive them. So that's why they have a focus on intrinsic motivation. In some papers they've looked at, they suggest that the way gamers perceive feedback, and feedback is like badges and scores, it matters how they perceive them. For instance, if the feedback is perceived as controlling, it damages intrinsic motivation, while if the feedback is looked at more as a source of information, it increases. And they look a lot of in social networking games and social sharing, and what they have found in other papers is that social feedback online, sharing these feedbacks, you get like some social comparison and in terms of competition, and that again will increase game enjoyment. And you can see that in like brain games, you don't have like multiplayer, but you have leaderboards, so you can play single player, and yet it's some competitive to get on the leaderboards. And they predict that the public performance-based feedback will increase enjoyment, interest, and perceived competition of the game, which will then lead to increased motivation to play. And I have emphasized public performance-based feedback because they have used a two-factorial design. As you can see in this figure, you have 2x2 squares, and you have the feedback type, it's score and badge. And the score is this performance-based feedback, and public is kind of shared, that the score is shared in a social network, for instance. So they focus on the bottom left square, and they think that this square will be significant compared to the others in terms of motivation and enjoyment and this sort of things. So they have recruited 202 people from social networks, and they play on average 0.4 hours daily online games, and of those hours, 0.31 is the social network games. That's how I understood it. And they are set, these participants are set to, by the way, the numbers illustrate the number of the participants, which group they belong. And they play a brain game for testing attention, where you have a set of images going through the screen, and you have probably selected some category, for example, dog, and there's two images of dogs, and you have to remember the second one that comes in this order. And they do this a couple of times. And after they're done, they ask some survey that answer questions about replayability, enjoyment, and competitivity. And what they measure is, at the bottom there, intrinsic motivation and competition, which one look next, and then enjoyment and interest. Yeah, so these two, how they measure these two is quite similar. They have used a 7-point scale in their survey, from like no, not at all, to yes, absolutely. And they asked two questions for intrinsic motivation, if they wanted to play the game, continue play the game, or if they wanted to play another time. And for competition, they just asked a very simple one: do you perceive this game as competitive? And the data, you can see the mean for both, and standard deviation, and also the Cronbach's alpha. And what that tells us, it's only for the intrinsic motivation, because it tells us the expected correlation between two tests, which measures the same construct, which is the construct is the intrinsic motivation, and the two questions, how related they are. And a 0.8, between 0.8 and 0.9, it's a good internal consistency. If it's been above 0.9, it's been excellent, and below 0.5, it's like not accepted at all. So that's good. For the next two, this was a bit different. They use an existing questionnaire, which they modified, and it's a lot more questions. They used some 7 dimensions, and all these dimensions kind of look at 2 distinct factors, which is enjoyment and interest. And some of these dimensions for enjoyment is like frustrating versus fun, and pleasant versus pleasant. And for dimension is dull versus challenging, or stupid versus intelligent, and so on. And you can see here as well, the contract alpha is also good in both cases. Yeah. And results. So they used the hypothesis testing, MANOVA, and for each dependent variable, they used a between subject test. So they had a pre-test and a post-test. And they relate to these before groups and look at their differences. So for motivation, there was a main effect on social sharing at the bottom row, but no effect on feedback type, and it was a significant interaction on social score condition, which it was the bottom left, which they predicted. And for enjoyment, there, as they write in their paper, is a trend towards significant. So maybe it's not significant though. And there was a main effect on feedback type, but no significance in any of the groups. For interest, you see the same kind of thing as motivation, although we also have a feedback type has a main effect. And competition, it's nothing at all. And yeah, so what they can read from this, and we bring back kind of their prediction, is that social shared performance-based feedback increase interest and motivation to play the game. So they have partially right, except for the competition and maybe feedback. Yeah, and because the feedback didn't affect interest or motivation, so what their data suggests is that there's some other underlying mechanisms that relate to this. And they also discuss a lot about why social networking games are so popular. And one of them, as they thought, would be competition. That would be something that encourage people and play more, but their data don't support it. And it engaging playing people to play longer if you have some social networking features. And they also talk about the self-determination theory, that people want to fulfill some psychological needs. This can be relatedness and relatedness and competence. Yeah. And also it was, for they also discussed their scope and their research, and that it's kind of hard to generalize this research as they have all their participants is recruited from social networks. So it's kind of, you shouldn't draw conclusions outside those people that doesn't use social networks, social media. Yeah. And in the end, conclusion, they conclude that there's a powerful motivation to share performance-based feedback within a social network, and that motivation affects the perception of the game and desire to play in the future. And in further research, they wanted to look more into how the self-determination theory, how it affects intrinsic motivation, and what in terms of social networking games. And they should move beyond the simulated game. I don't actually know why they say that. What does a simulated game mean? And the simulated social sharing, which kind of, didn't they really share their badges and scores, or was it just within the participants group? Yeah, so that is about it. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, before we start the opponent, hopefully you also saw there were a number of links to other stuff we've been doing in the course out of this paper, right? So you guys should be getting more used to the idea of I can read these papers, there are more of these papers that I understand because some of the terms, some of the areas that it's talking about are familiar. So hopefully you could start seeing some of that and some of the answers. So yeah, but we'll move on to the, so in critique of the paper. So
Okay.
yeah, it's better. Go and stand. You can actually stand in camera view if you stand slightly closer. Yeah, there you're. Well, I'll just check. You are actually in camera. Yeah, you're in camera view there. That's good.
Okay. So first, my critique. It's about when in this survey they measure intrinsic motivation. They just ask two questions that you showed us. It's okay, but they don't actually measure if they. I don't tell that participant say not true, but they didn't measure if they really will play after the study finish, or if they really want to play. So I mean that maybe this study should be more long term, because maybe it's more relevant to to make more long term study to check this.
Yeah, they also talk about this. That brain games and is tend to design for long term and increase cognitive abilities if people play these games on a regular basis. But it's kind of hard to do research on that. As I understood it, because people tend to don't know if they have been increased in the long term. How they wrote it. But yeah, definitely long term would be, and that's also what the further study suggests.
Okay.
So also, I mean, that speaks to intention, right? So you have so one of the technology usability acceptance models. There's a tout model for technology acceptance. Talks about intention to use, and sort of that idea of do you intend to use it, and the mapping between intention and actually doing things, right? And it's certainly not 100%, right? So just because people say they'll do something doesn't mean they will actually do it.
Maybe they will see that they will play, but no.
yes, it's a bit like saying, I intend to lose weight as my New Year's resolution, so I will not eat as many lollies or 5 bags of chips. Intention doesn't necessarily match up with reality. So it is a challenge to find what percentage of intention actually does map to action. So and unfortunately it appears to be different in different situations. Right? So in some situations there is almost no correlation between an intention to act and action, and in other situations it's very strong. So yeah, unless you have indications that your activity sits within one of these kind of already studied areas, it's hard to draw conclusions. But, yeah. Okay. So.
Okay. Next, my counter argument about game context. So they explained, of course, what game they choose. It was the game to test attention, but they didn't explain why they choose especially this game. So they just take it and start doing survey. So nothing explanation why this game or
Yeah,
like
I can't answer for them, but I don't know. It's attention and memory. They don't talk about much their game. They presented 3 images, and yeah, I don't know.
So in a defense of saying, okay, I can't speak for them as well, but the idea is if this technique is generalizable, right, then the idea is it shouldn't matter which brain game you use, because it should be about how feedback score and social sharing, right? So whether badges or score and social sharing and not social sharing, are relevant for motivation. So it doesn't really matter the particular activity. So it could have been, you know, taking out or doing the dishes. If you had an app that would record doing the dishes and give you points for that, then you could have analyzed whether a badge or a score and sharing that badge or score socially would have an effect, right? So so one of the defenses they could claim is that we don't really mind at the low level what the activity is. We're more interested in, does the gamification aspect, is it effective? And it should be effective for any brain game, right? And so if you do want to generalize it, then it should be okay to pick, you know, this brain game or that brain game or that brain game, and anything we add this social sharing to should work, right? So that would be the argument saying, well, it didn't really matter which one it was, right? The counter to that is, no, you should tell us which one it is so that we can look at it and see if there are things about that game that make it particularly effective for sharing or not, right? So this is one of those kind of not giving us enough information because you're trying to write a short paper. Or more likely, they used the ones they found first. And they didn't really have much of a process for analyzing the 50 potential brain games and scoping them down to the 2 that have particular features, like the most popular or the most expensive or an open source one, or they probably didn't have a process. They just had some, and they went, oh, you know, it's a brain game. We want to generalize to all brain games. Any one of them's fine, right? So, there is a bit of the probably convenience, but they could also argue that it's for generalization purposes.
Okay. One of my counter arguments you mentioned already somehow about participant in this survey was people who are already in the using social media and already playing in these games, and so it's like
I think your criticism, which is, you know, people who like social media.
Yeah, everything is social media.
Yeah, and they're motivated by being social on social media, which is where you found them.
So they actually mentioned it in a discussion, but it can be an argument that it's not very generalizable for all people. It's like the same to make a survey how many people use internet, making survey in the internet. It's,
yes, do you like the internet? By asking people who are using the internet, do you like the internet?
Yeah, so
so the defense here is not, obviously this paper cannot defend that point because I think it's pretty obvious that that's flawed. So obvious they didn't do it good. How would you go about creating a survey that didn't have that problem? What would be your approach?
Well, I would reach out to other people and recruit them from social networks.
So how would you reach out? What would be your approach?
Well, in her paper, they found posters in schools, and
so that would be you go to schools, you go to posters in schools, you find people who are playing games and approach them in the non-social aspects of, like, the non-social network aspects of those games. And could try finding people who are playing single-player games, for example, which engaging antisocial people is tricky, right? By their nature. But you'd use other techniques to try and get it. But I think it is a very strong criticism of one of the conclusions of the paper, which is, the benefits of social networking. The fact that you find the people on social networking sites means that they're the kind of people who probably benefit from making things more social.
Okay. Maybe next my counter arguments are not so strong as previous, but I noticed that they they make a gender. They have both women and men, and people from different age categories. But it's just my opinion that for like he mentioned this self-determination theory is to willingness that other people respect you and all these things. It's I think that these people willingness really depends on the age. So it can be so median of age in this research was 25.6. I think that it's just my personal opinion that for people who more elder, it's not so important to have like social respect on them. So maybe it's not so like strong for elder or for, but yeah, it's really correlate a lot with age.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So because they don't then talk much about if they found differences of age. But they did say something.
They didn't said nothing.
Yeah.
They mentioned that they have like gender separation and age, people from different ages, but they didn't make a conclusions about this.
Yeah, no, I didn't think that. And so you can draw two conclusions from that, right? So as a person defending this. One is, oh yeah, we definitely looked at it, but there was no difference, right? And so, it didn't get in the paper because we couldn't tell you all the things that didn't matter, right? Because, lots of things didn't matter. But the other one is we didn't have a chance to analyze the differences, or the number of people in each category would be so small. So if you had age groups of lots of 10 and you've only got 50 people in the area, you're down to 10 in each of the 5 age ranges, and the variation might be so large that it kind of, we couldn't really find anything statistically significant out of the data. So we did look at it, we couldn't find anything, maybe there's something there, or we didn't look because it was so small groups that, we didn't think so.
The variation was 8 to 25 plus minus 8 years, doesn't go like spectrum age spectrum.
No. So they might say, well, we didn't really have many people. We had a large group of people between say 20 and 30. Right? So they had probably quite a big group of that, but only 2 or 3 people over 60. Or none over 60, and 2 or 3 in their 50s, and 5 in their 30s. You look at it and go, well, there's just not enough numbers there to do any interesting age-based analysis, right? So that could be seen as a challenge, that you're just not able to say much about age variation of this, right? Also, I would come in with the fact that your correlation with age, right, could be that there are fewer people in their 50s who are using the social media sites, for example, but we're only recruiting from social media sites. So because we're already filtering based on a particular feature, you might then not secondarily analyze that like age and say, oh look, these people are like, so women who are over 90 but are posting on Facebook every day might have the same Facebook approach and usage as men who are in their 20s, right? Because of they've already been filtered for people who post status updates every day, right? It's just there might only be 1 out of 50 that you find who are over 90 posting daily Facebook updates, whereas women who are 18 you might find 20-30% might, rather than 1 in 1,000. So it's once you've already filtered, some of what your criticism is this age-related interaction may have been filtered out by the selection criteria. So you might not find it as strong because of the way you've done the original selection. So there are more reasons why people don't do it. You could extend and have an appendix that you would have give additional data. There are some movements down to have where you're actually supposed to share all your data so other people can do the same analysis you did on the original data. Right? So you anonymize it and put it into a shared databases. and let other people access the data, so you can rerun tests and they can dig into the data themselves and extract more information, for example, gender stuff. But I don't think this one has a link to that. Okay. Yep.
Okay, and the last argument is that it's also about participants. That they mentioned that they have 97% of Dutch. I don't think that it's like nationality influence a lot their behavior, but who knows? It's also can be like so they use just one nationality. So
Yes, yeah, I'm getting just Dutch people. Yeah, no, fine. How are you defend that?
Well, they, wow, as they recruited from social media, it's like, why limit it? I don't know.
yeah, so it's very easy when you like find people in social media to find people from different countries. So
Probably
why?
what should I group they go, and that happened to be a Dutch group.
And they may have made the request in Dutch. So their international friends might have seen the request.
So it seems to be your name here in Dutch.
Yes, yes. So, and having a brain game that's in Dutch, limits your scope of international people. And there are some people internationally who speak Dutch, but again, it would have been better, or perhaps with more nationalities if they'd been able to recruit in English and use an English brain game. But that would have required them to do more of the development work in English, which for the Dutch shouldn't have been that difficult, but it probably, it's a tricky decision. Languages becomes a tricky decision. But do you think that the culture matters?
Yeah, some, but it's hard to tell.
Without actually having data, you can have an intuition, but no evil.
I have a couple of comments. First, one question. So they talk about extrinsic and intrinsic motivation. Do they do a good job in analyzing that aspect, that dimension?
They don't talk much about it. It's one paragraph. Yeah, it's kind of a little diffuse, I guess.
So here are my two worries, whether I really understand what it's all about. So under intrinsic motivation, they say, we measured motivation with 2 questions. In the 7-point scale, there was, do you want to continue playing after finishing? And do you wish to play this game all the time? What is the intrinsic and extrinsic motivation here? I mean, they don't ask why you want to play, they just ask, do you want to play? And it could be any extrinsic, because if they really want to keep scoring higher, it could be extrinsic, or it could be intrinsic, doesn't say. That's it?
No?
No. And also, they don't say that, but you get the feeling that they pick score as a kind of an extrinsic and badge as a kind of intrinsic or more intrinsic. But they don't discuss why did they pick this. I mean, if you want to have an intrinsic motivator, it would probably be more on how well you perform related to before. I mean, if you go into all the biometrics, people want to run a bit faster than before or longer than before, and just getting badges, it doesn't seem to be that they are very intrinsic.
They say that in a brain game for self-determination theory, that completing a brain game can be like increased competence as a badge, I guess, in another game, something.
But then you could have other measures. I mean, you could show them the curves, how they score, and other measures, but just badges. It feels to me that that's like just a high score. And I think that this badge, you get this score, it doesn't seem to be that different in terms of game mechanics, I would say. The other, if you bring up this slide where you show the numbers of the 3.7 and 3.8, the average or how well they rated the games, because it's a 7-point scale.
Can you hit 0 by you? Yeah, yeah.
So on the early slides, you had the scores. 3.7 and 3.88. There you go. Okay, so need 3.7, 3.88. Now, this is a 7-point scale with the lowest number is 1. So need is 4. Anything below 4 is negative, closer to not so interesting. And they don't discuss that. I mean, the games, they aren't even neutral. They're on the low side of interesting. And they don't discuss that. True. So as Samuel said, they didn't do a good job in games that will be motivating. So if you were to look at motivation and you pick the least motivated games and try to look at motivation, is that a good strategy?
And yeah, I'm picking. If you picked doing the dishes, right? So you could ask people, do you want to do the dishes again? Do you want to keep doing the dishes? And will you do the dishes again next time? On like a scale of definitely to certainly not. We would probably get lower than 3.7, I would assume. Would that be probably true? You guys would go lower than 3.7 on your intrinsic motivation to do the dishes? Yep. So it's probably better than doing the dishes. But you could say, just adding badges to the, you are the most dishly doing person in the world. And
you reached dish number 20 this week.
Yes, you got the 20 dishes this week. You did the dishes 15 times. I gave you badges for dish doing, and you could share them on Facebook.
Of course.
I'm the Uber dishwasher of the world. There's that whole kind of, is it a good game? Would I want to be, an interesting one here is for the social media side, would I want other people to know that I was enjoying and playing this game, right? For some training activities, you don't want people to know. Like if you were doing if you were doing spelling training, right, as an adult, you might not share that on your social media saying, I'm learning how to spell better. Because yay me, right? So I'm doing a brain training game. Why are you doing a brain training game? I don't feel so smart. So there are things that they didn't discuss around, like, do people want to share the fact that they're actually doing this, particularly if it's this low, right? If it's below, like on average neutral below. Would I want to tell people that I'm playing this shitty game? Right? I mean, there are a lot of closet Bejeweled players, for example, or Candy Crush players, right? Who won't tell other people that they're playing Candy Crush because it's not a proper game. So there's a many. And
another point, in addition to this, can be like, for example, if people play some games, they want to share it because they're shy. It's not maybe very good to play in these games or something. And another point, if they have a low level of not a great amount of points, they finished it with not good result. Why? They don't want to share it. They want to share it only if they have a great result.
Yeah, so you don't want to share your first bad score. And in a brain training game, because Brain Age had the interesting thing where it would tell you your perceived brain age, right? You would never share, look, my brain is 55 when I'm 42. Yay, me! 12. Yeah, my brain age is 12, right? I'm not sure what that would mean. I think about, sand pits too much or something. But yeah, so there are a lot of complexity around sharing performance, right? Which they don't really go much into as in the rest of those things around the complexity of sharing. And the idea that they were measuring intrinsic motivation when they didn't really dig in and define and work hard on understanding ways they could measure intrinsic motivation, right? And they didn't ask why would you keep playing the game, right? I thought one of the nice ones that I saw in a study was at the end of the game, the people could keep the game or take $10. Right? So as a measure of how much they like the game, rather than just in saying, oh yeah, it was a good game. You say, right, you can either keep the game or you can take $10. What do you want to do?
Yeah, the game was good, but I take the $10.
Good, but you know, it's not $10 good. So like that's a more explicit measure of because if you just ask people, would you play this game again? As a person taking that survey, you'll find most people will say, oh yeah, because you know they want you to be happy because you know you've made them play this game, and there's a bias towards kind of making the experimenter happy. And so a question of would you play this game again with no consequence and no follow-up to that question becomes almost
Biased.
irrelevant and very, very biased, right? So if you ask them, would you play this game or this game, right? That becomes more of a, oh, well, I'll play that one, right? So they don't necessarily know which one you want them to say, right? But if you say, would you play this game again? Of course. Yes, Mum, I'll do the dishes again. But yeah, you have a bias towards agreeing just because you're being asked, right? Without any sort of commitment or consequence, that agreement doesn't matter very much. So, like one of the things they did, and they talked about doing, so moving on to some of mine, and principal component analysis, right? So they looked at the larger number of questions, right? And they decided, and they had a look at those and say, well, you know, primarily they measure similar kinds of things. So instead of asking 7 or 8 questions, or 7 or 8 different categories of questions, we'll just go down to 2 because it's kind of measuring similar things, right? So how much do you guys know on principal component analysis? Have you ever done principal component analysis and had it explained to you? Okay. I think it's reasonable to draw up on the board some principal component analysis and just quickly go through what that means. Okay? Yep, so you guys are happy for me to do that? So who knows what principal component now? Murray knows principal component analysis. Rina knows. As researchers, you should know principal component analysis. But I can do this now. Thank you both for your presentations. Okay, so this is one of the key approaches to having multiple dimensional information, right? So if you've got information, a number in like 7 dimensions, right? So you have 7 different categories, and you've got an amount in all of those categories. So for example, when we're talking about our questioning system, we talk about, you know, the importance, right? And I can give that a score from 1 to 7. And then relevance, so relevance, and maybe if it's concise, I can give it a score for that. I can give it a score for coherent. I could give it a score for answerability and focus or something, right? So I can create a bunch of categories, and I could give scores in each of these categories. Now, one of the challenges we have is, okay, that's kind of, if I'm going to ask all of these things, that might be too much. Can I extract some more relevant information out of this? What's the critical element here? And so that would be many dimension ones. You can see a relationship. Another one that we might use would be weight and height. Could be 2 components, right? So those are 2 components. And then we also have in relation to health, right? And what you actually find is, you know, weight isn't just a direct one, right? It seems to be just because you weigh 100 kilograms. If you're 6'5" and weigh 100 kilograms, that's probably different to if you're
4'5" and weigh 100 kilograms, right? So it's not just a simple relationship. It's more complex. And so one of the things we do is we say, well, okay, is there a way we can reduce this down and find the most relevant bits of information? Okay, so in here you could measure all sorts of things, and like for people you could have gender and you can have age. So you can have all of these features of a person and be talking about their health status. Now, if we're looking at all of these features, and smoking could be like how much you smoke, 0 to a lot, what your age is, what your gender is, what your weight is, what your height is. All of these are factors that you could all put together. Now, a principal component analysis says we've got all this massive data. Can we, if we look at the points of data that we have, can we find what is the main rate of change? Okay, so for example, if we have if we had height and weight and health going in that direction, right, and we're trying to we want to see if there's a relationship between health and a feature, right? And we find that it's got a complex relationship here. What we look for is the principal component, right? And so a principal component says, where is the largest variation in the data, right? What is the most significant of the variations in the data? And can we find that component? Right? Now, if you only have height and weight, what you find is that they found a principal component, which they try and find, which is BMI, body mass index, was the one that they if you unify it down that scale, that accounts for a lot of the variation in health, was based on BMI, if you only had those two. Height wasn't the most effective one of measuring it, weight wasn't the most effective one, but it's that combination. And so when you're looking at principal component analysis, there's this mathematical idea that what you're doing is you're taking a group of data points and you're trying to find the maximum variation. Right? And you're trying to find an axis to say, instead of having both this one and this one, can I create a single axis which accounts for the majority of the change? Right? So what's the principal component of this information? Right? Now, for health, if you do this on all of these matrices, what you start finding is well, for this, I think you'd find some combination of smoking and age will give you the largest spread, right? So you're going from non-smoking and young to smoking and old. Your chance of dying might be the largest variation. Other things, your age, your gender, your weight, your gender, your weight, your height. Your height probably doesn't have much of an effect, except by moderated weight. But these probably don't matter as much as age and smoking, right? So the principal component might be some combination of age and smoking, right? It could be that smoking covers the main variation. Now, depending on the way you do principal component analysis, you can either do it as you can create these multi-axis ones, or you keep these and you say, if I ask you a question around quality, right, and you rank a question on 1 to 7 as being a high quality question, and I've asked you all of these questions, okay, which one is most correlated between these and your actual, like when I ask you what's good quality question, what's the principal component? And so one way of saying that, instead of connecting these by saying, well, it's age and smoking together, you could say, well, if I just look at these independently, what people seem to say is their measure of importance was the one that gave me the most correlation with their assessment of overall quality. Okay, so it might so answerability may be kind of independent, right? It wasn't a big deal. It didn't seem to change much. There wasn't much variation on it. It wasn't one of the primary, the principal components. Okay, so this idea of principal component analysis is if I found that importance was the one that actually indicated this most strongly, do I even need to ask the rest of these questions if this is the principal component, if this is the biggest component, if it's the one that does most of the work, then the next variation is this, right? And so if I had a choice between asking this question and this question doesn't make it very much, so I just asked this question. Now, if you had height and weight in here, right? So you got all these people, and you're saying, well, okay, the BMI creates this line, and what we find is that people up here are. So if I look at this and say, right, these are all people who are. So if this is weight, here are unhealthy, and here are healthy people. Right? So what I've done is I'm looking at this graph, and I say, well, to cover the most variation in health rates, that is the widest variation for these being healthy and these being unhealthy. On the health axis, that becomes the largest variation, right? Because a person here and a person here are all equally healthy, so there's no variation in health in that direction. Right? So I look at BMI saying this is low BMI and this is high BMI. BMI is the one, and then BMI is a relationship between height and weight. Right? So this is kind of a way that you try and minimize down your components to try and extract the relative important one. So what they've done is they said, okay, these people ask 7, 8 questions around motivation. We reckon we can get away with one category by just combining those and saying, well, most of the principal components in importance, so we'll just ask that question. Okay. If you do the math, there's a lot of math you can do on principal component analysis. A lot of image processing looks for principal component analysis and then throws away other variations, right? Because there are often lots of particularly small features that you can throw away and people don't notice, right? So, but you want to find the big ones that they associate with quality, right? So I think, so yeah, so that was the idea of principal component. I think it's got some challenges when you're decreasing the number of questions you ask, because I think going down to just 2 questions might be a bit short. And it's one of those things that we talk about when we're asking people questions is, if you make the question too obvious what you're trying to get at, people know what you're trying to get at, and so can answer according to what they think you'll want to know, right? Whereas if you ask a question that is subtler, right, that doesn't necessarily make it as obvious what you're saying, right, is, if I say, do you like beer, right, you might go, yes. But if I say, if I asked about refreshing drinks, refreshing alcoholic drinks, right? You might go, well, I don't know if he's asking about beer or if he's asking about, ciders or still white wine or something, right? Refreshing alcoholic beverage. So, and then I could ask you multiple questions I could then try and work out if you like beer or not, without directly asking you, do you like beer? Right? Now, for some of these questions around motivation and intention to play, if I ask you directly, if you ask your kids, for example, if kids are terrible, well, parents are terrible with this, if the kid breaks something and you say, did you break the vase? They go, no. Because, you're not getting in trouble, right? But if you say, So what were you doing when the vase broke, right? Or did you see the vase break? And they go, yeah. If they saw the vase break, they were probably there at the time, right? So you haven't actually asked them if they did it, but if you ask them, did you see the vase break? Then they don't turn on that, oh, they're seeing if I've done it, right? So asking directly, you can get different questions if you ask around, right? And just, so sometimes if you remove some of the other questions, what you lose is that kind of ability to ask confirming questions, right? And one of the things you'll find if you do surveys, you'll often have questions which seem a bit similar, right? And sometimes they'll seem similar and they'll ask it in the reverse case. Have you seen that? Where you ask like the not version of a question you've asked earlier, right? Now, partly that is just to check someone's not going tick, 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 all down the right-hand side, which we're supposed to do when we ask you guys your opinions of our courses, right? Because there's some of you who will tick just, oh, yeah, great, it was a good course, tick, 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 tick. I can't read anything he says there. It's just, I agree with everything he says about the course, right? So what I do is I add a question saying, the course was a terrible course and I would not recommend it. Yes, I completely agree with that statement. And somewhere else it says, the course was a very good course and I wish my friends had taken the course too. Yes, and if I see both of those are high, I go, that person wasn't reading. So I can just throw away their whole survey because they never read anything, right? And so we do that to try and catch people who aren't actually reading, right? Now, once you do the principal component analysis and you get rid of all of the other questions, you've got no way of checking to see, is this really actually a person who is paying attention to what I'm asking, right? So there are some risks in getting rid of questions. And, you know, questioning people is an art form, really. There's a science to it, but there's also a kind of, experience and a feeling for the audience that you're talking to and a kind of understanding of the complexity. Just takes time to learn. Okay, we'll take a 10-minute break and we'll come back for the next reversal. Okay, so bye internet people for the next 10 minutes.
Tables they're referring to. Tables
On Okay, I think they hit the link on the web.
because the link you gave to the prompter
Yep. Was
yeah.
there was no other material, so okay.
He's having problems. Processing.
It's too much video coming in too fast. I'm going to just stream it through this. Wow, that's getting more.
It's still better than the wireless. Oh, apparently I also can't have internet because I'm too busy streaming. Right, I'll go and
Still streaming.
still streaming. But I'll go back and drink and I'll get
You turn on the video or okay, because you cannot pause it. But you can turn off the video and sound.
Stream with no media. Like the font size thing.
Yeah, it's huge.
And then the figures.
No. You cannot read them at all.
Well, this one you can, but these guys, these tables. There's no way I can figure out what some of these things.
No. No.
Figure out where the tables are.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yep.
There are some private videos again on the YouTube channel.
Still private? Okay.
I guess it's every time when Simon is recording.
He forgets to change it. Yeah.
I
will
guess
do it.
it's again today. So.
Yeah, no problem. Yep. Thanks for letting me know. We can quickly fix that. Because I think by default it records as a private. You have to sort of manually go and tweak it. Yeah.
Can you change something after it's done recording?
Yeah. I don't think I will be able to change it right now for this one, but I can do that for the other ones that we already have.
The figures I see. The new teams.
Well, I could probably have downloaded it. I just printed. You probably download the PDF first.
Right. Yeah.
That's probably a better idea. But you would think that they had a good style sheet. But really, that was wrong.
Mariusz,
Yes.
why did you post or deploy the IXC system to the US instead of the EU?
Very good question. Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, we have the first year for free with Amazon. It runs on the instance there, and the defaults were US, so I just didn't think too much about deploying it in Ireland. But yeah, we could have deployed it in EU. Yeah.
You get like extra latency between network and all of those things.
Yeah, that is true. No.
So you can deploy to the EU still, you just have to check on the upper right hand corner.
Yeah,
It says-
so we can redeploy it to Ireland. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it will be a bit faster.
Yeah.
Good hint. Yeah.
So how much is that?
It shouldn't matter too much.
It shouldn't really be a big.
Well, kind of, it depends how your web application was. If it's many parts of the application that depends on each other, so everything is loaded sequentially, not in parallel, it can make a huge difference. Because normally it adds about 50 to 100 milliseconds between here and the US compared to having it somewhere in the EU where it can be just 20 milliseconds.
Yeah, it's a valid point. Yeah. And because it's primarily used here, so that there is no point hosting it in US.
The requirement host in the US, unless we're going to suddenly have a massive number of US customers, or users, which we don't expect
No.
anytime. Okay. Couple of minutes.
Any other questions? Because one of the interesting things around exams, you know what the most predictive question is for your exam grade? Well, so in first year, my old supervisor, one of the things he did was to analyze the things that would predict your grade. And he said there were particular questions, questions that would be really, really good. But what he found that was the best predictor of student grade was the question, what grade do you think you will get in this course? That was the best predictor of actual final grade over what's your math background, have you done computer science before, how often you attend lectures, how often you attend labs, how much time you spend studying. Like of all of those, the one that was the best predictor was what grade do you think you'll get in this course? Right?
What time did they ask? Right before the exam or?
Actually, no, they asked at the beginning of the course. Before the course started, they had look at all the things that might lead you to doing well in the course, right? And study habits, and I think it might have been in the middle of it, yeah, because they asked about study habits and seeing if people were, if they had been studying things, yeah. But no, what people thought they would get was the best predictor of grades.
But is it like you're kind of mentally preparing yourself to some stage, or why? Because if you say, I'll get a C, for example, you're kind of preparing yourself to get a C, and you're kind of tailoring your studying to get a C, or?
It seems to be a whole bunch of those sort of things.
Quantitative, the qualitative studies.
Yeah. Yeah. So we didn't dig into why it was effective, but that was a very effective, a very highly predictive feature was what people's expectations of their grade. Right? And it's actually also one of the problems with amount of time spent studying. Right? So I've been looking at other things because we're looking at whether it's beneficial to give you guys this video recording. Okay, so how do video recordings affect people's grades in courses? Right? So what would be your thoughts? Would providing video recordings to first and second years improve grades, decrease grades, have no effect on grades? What?
Because someone wants to go back and see something. If there was a discussion like on the topic, it would be nice to hear it again.
So one of the challenges is that is true for some individuals, right? The problem with the population though is that they do find that if you get video recordings, you decrease participation in lecture. So people spend less effort getting to the actual session, right? Which means the people who go to the session and then watch the video later, yeah, they probably do slightly better. But then other students who see I can just do it later, and then don't put the effort in, means they, even though they go and see it later, they don't get as much because they didn't put the effort in that is required. And so you get this balance effect where you're providing it means that it doesn't look to give any benefit at all, right? Because for the whole population, that doesn't, like some people might benefit, other people have a worse experience. Right? They had the same issue with like so in this paper where we're about to discuss there are other papers that I was looking at around weight loss, which were talking about the users and players balancing activity. Right? So if you make someone do more exercise, one of the things they might then do is eat more. Right? So it does more exercise and then you lose weight. And unless you control food intake,
Typically not.
Typically not, right? Because you might build more muscle, and with an unrestricted food intake, when you put your body under load, what you do is you just compensate, you just eat more. And so unless you control both, you tend not to get weight loss just from more exercise. Not because more exercise isn't good for you, it doesn't actually burn more energy, it's just that your body compensates for it, right? So providing video lectures
some students will compensate for the fact there are video lectures by then not turning up, and then try and do everything in the last day. And whether that actually means they learn more. Yeah, so something that seems simple, like, of course, if you provide them more material, they'll do better. Be like, if you make them do more exercise, of course they'll lose weight. And well, yes, they automatically compensate by eating more, right? And you get the same. If you eat less, you will lose weight. And the answer is, for a lot of people, if they eat less, they do less, right? They actually, if you eat less, they become lethargic because your body doesn't want to use energy it doesn't have. And so you don't keep your energy levels up. You sit around more, you don't do as much, you get grumpy, you stay in bed longer. And so you compensate. So although you eat less, you don't actually lose weight. Okay? So there are compensatory mechanisms which make the relationship more complex than just a simple do this one thing, you have this one thing.
Definitely. That's why it's the whole industry.
Yeah. Unfortunately, there is a very large industry around this. Okay, so let's go to the next session. We'll get the code up. It's also very disappointing when people compensate.
all over this.
Yeah.
For pretty much everything. We try what people do.
We have buying a faster car means that we get away with less accidents because we compensate by driving faster. And the same thing is with but then you just compensate by being more aggressive.
If you get a fast
level is constant.
if you buy a fast car, does that mean you're going to turn up late?
I want to have
Yes, no, you turn up late because you leave later. That's the car. So you think, oh, it'll only take Yeah, no, we're terrible for it. We keep one thing, and our
just start.
natural tendency is to balance it. Well, and that's one of the things we talked about with, so when I did many ranks, we used skill weapons with no pad. And you have fewer injuries than when you use fully padded and having people just whack the leather out of each other, right? With padded weapons. Because they get concussions and they just go really
Is it turned on? Yeah.
it should be turned on. It's on.
So maybe you need to like really, okay, let's try to find you.
Try changing.
Try unplugging and plugging. The typical.
Have you tried texting? Try go. Oh,
No, it's coming. Yes.
there we go. Okay. I know you need to have the things on.
You on.
And there's lights that decide, no, you didn't want the lights on. You want the lights on. We don't care what you're trying to do. You want the lights on.
Car racing, car not the car, comparatively, what you can't do. They were told by the school and tell your parents that you need a really sharp knife. Most dangerous options you can have is a knife that doesn't have a sharp edge because you put so much pressure and when it slips, it hits you and goes straight into your body. Sharp knife.
Yeah, because you compensate.
Yeah, you go.
Okay, so weight management. You might want to press the 0 because that's really hard to see.
Okay.
Hopefully the 0 lasts for
Hopefully the 0 will last 10 minutes
And
then
then
someone else
don't
will come
move.
and press 0. It's a little bit easier, but okay.
Okay, so I want to present paper, Effects on Pediatric Weight Management Program with and without active video games. This paper contains of introduction, methods, results, discussion, and conclusions. Some of these paragraphs have some sub-paragraphs, which I will discuss now. First of all, I would like to highlight the problem of obesity and overweight among adults and children, especially in USA. So, according to last statistic, 70% of all people from 2 to 19 years of old have problems with weight. So it's in USA. So it's really a huge number. This study has two hypotheses. First is the addition of active video game to the problem would result a significant increase in objective measure to daily moderate to vigorous physical activity. This parameter called MVPA, and another parameter is vigorous physical activity, VPA. We will look on these two parameters through this study. And second hypothesis is that adding video gaming to the usual 16-week treatment program would lead to significantly greater reductions in relative weight. So method that they used, design and settings. Assessment was made on the baseline at the week of 8 and 16. Study objects were randomly assigned within location to two programs. First, it was this program with active gaming, and another is just program only. They were randomly assigned by study coordinator. They have 11 study sites, different schools, and YMCA. I didn't check. I didn't know what is it before, but I checked. It's like a young men Christianity association. Yeah, so it's just shows that we have a wide variety of different schools and institutions. Recruitment we have inclusion criteria and exclusion. Inclusion criteria were BMI greater than 85% for sex and age. BMI is body mass index. It's equal to like our weight in kilograms divided by height in meters. Yes. Age ranging from 8 to 12. And of course, willingness of parents and children to participate in these weekly treatment sessions. And exclusion criteria were using of medication, which can increase weight or uncontrolled process of people that cannot lose weight, according to medicine, cannot take part in this experiment. Physical people who has children who has some physical conditions, which also not allowed to participate in it, and of course unwillingness of participation in this study. On this figure, I provided it to show how many people were included in this study. So in total, 195 children were interested in this topic, and shows the interested at the beginning of the study. But according to some excluded criteria, just 75 children were actually participated. Yeah, and there you can see how many people like discontinued the program, and at what time, and how many children cannot excluded from analysis for non-valid data. Also, okay, so some words about this program. Join for me. It's a family-based treatment of childhood obesity, which means that this program includes not only participation of children, but also their parents. This program consists of write-in, specification of new weekly goal, assessment of progress toward behavior goals. And in addition to, as I mentioned, we have two groups. First is program only, and second is a program with active gaming. And this active gaming with Plus program, they also were provided Xbox and Kinect devices and two active games. The first is Kinect Adventurous, and second is Kinect Sports. So I personally played in Kinect Adventurous, and but I think that this active game is more interesting for children. Yeah, but actually this survey was about children, so yeah. Assessment of physical activity. So in order to measure physical activity was used accelerometer.
It was that.
Yeah, thanks.
I thought the 12 minutes. 12%, that was an awfully far 12%.
Let's do it right now.
You're going to me saying, I'll just be a minute there. How long will this pipe take to fix? You know, any moment now. Is it alive?
I don't know. Starting.
Oh, 12% really was not 12%. Was
It's like that. You need to hurry.
it? Yeah, I have a 10% warning, and then it gives me a 7% warning, which is takes about 3 minutes to go from 10% to 7%, and then about 3 minutes to go from 7% to now I'm shutting down. Okay, there we go.
Participants were instructed to wear this motion sensor device during the waking hours and for 7 days. Also, in order to be included in the analysis, they had to have 3 or more monitoring days. And in these previous figures that I showed, that's why a lot of children were excluded on the later levels of studying because they didn't wear this device. Yeah, and the daily time wearing of this device of accelerometer should be 9 hours. Relative weight and BMI is its score. So height and weight was measured at baseline and 8 and 16 weeks of the study. Body mass index was calculated, as I already mentioned, as height divided by weight divided by height. Yes, and percentage overweight was calculated as a percentage greater than a median BMI for age and gender. So it, of course, this BMI, normal BMI index depends on the age and gender. Okay, so results of this study. No significant differences were observed between with respect to demographic or baseline anthropometric measures. It means that this study included table where they show that they have participants from different age categories, from different weight, even from different gender, and even from different races. So they have all black, white, Hispanic, and so on. Okay, the results which included in this table, I want to highlight some of them. So firstly, if we can separate this in program and active gaming group and just program only. And here you can see that on in comparison with baseline, MVPay parameter was significantly increased on 8 week and 16 week. So in comparison with baseline, it's significantly increasing. But to compare also this parameter with program only, it was even a little bit decreased here and here in comparison with this number. Another important number which can tell us that program plus active gaming group was really better is this number. It's between group difference after whole program, after 16-week change. So this means big difference between program plus active gaming and program only. Discussions. Actually, the two hypotheses that were provided at the beginning were supported. First is significant increases in MVP among overweight and obese children, as I showed according to results in previous table, and the addition of active gaming to an established program significantly enhanced weight loss. Also providing participant this active gaming console and these two games resulted in a doubling of reduction in relative weight and BMI score. So it's a huge result. Of course, this study has some strengths and limitations. Strengths of this study is it was first randomized clinical trial. The potential for translating these findings to other settings and population groups is high, so generalizability is high. And the study used the state-of-art object measured physical activity. As I mentioned, it was this accelerometer. And of course, some disadvantages and limitations. Observed changes in physical activity and relative weight should be viewed as relatively short-term effects, 16 weeks. But it depends with which studies we will compare it, short-term or long-term. And significant number of participants failed to wear on themselves this accelerometer to measure actually their physical activity. And the cost associated with purchase, for example, if we will look that this active gaming has an increasing in weight loss for low-income family, it can be a problem to buy this game console and games also. Okay, conclusions. All in all, this addition of active gaming to the program had positive effects on physical activity and relative weight, and future studies should examine the effects of active gaming during longer periods and complete formal cost effectiveness analysis. Okay, that's all.
Okay, so critique.
Change place because I need my computer.
Okay.
Okay, so yeah, I don't have too many points, or yeah, we'll see how it goes. They had 7, almost half of those participating were from YMCA schools or YMCA, and according to their Wikipedia page, it says that though they aim to put Christian principle into practice by developing a healthy body, mind, and spirit, and my thinking here is that these participants maybe is easier to motivate into having that because they have a background where they have been practicing this, having a healthy body and mind kind of thing. So they might be more motivated, which is to exercise and having a guardian by their side and all this. And at the same time, there were other similar research that contradicts the results. So maybe that has some influence about how they selected their.
Okay, so maybe it's yes, but my point is that in this study, children who participated in this study, they were with these white problems and with obesity. If they were studying in this YMCA school, they of course listening all this like contribution to have healthy lifestyle but they still have this problem. So that means that these speeches in their school and they didn't help them. So yeah. So
Another one like you have this one. I have a question. The discontinued from the program, they still getting analyzed. It's kind of weird doing. For instance, it's on the left side, it's 8 discontinued, 2 from week 8 and 6 from week 16, but that doesn't add up with the numbers that getting analyzed. A bit confusing. I can see that maybe the 2 from week 8 is apart from the 3 that is excluded, or maybe the 1 from week 8 is apart from the 3 that is excluded, but I don't know. I find it kind of, what does discontinued mean? They don't say that in their report anywhere.
Yeah, I cannot answer on this because
No.
they were actually nothing about it in the paper. Yeah.
So what they usually do in this situation is that, as it says there, you had some discontinue at week 8 and some discontinue at week 16. So your analysis for your average score at week 16 is only of those who are still participating, right? But your average at week 8 is of those who were participating. So you have different averages, right? That's one of the ways, because they're worried that if they just went down to, if they lost 7 or 8 out of 34, you're down to 26, and it's starting to get it's starting to get close to that 20 kind of not enough category. So they want to include as much data as possible. Right?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, they don't properly say what they did about that. So it's the people who drop out may be statistically different from the people who don't drop out.
Yeah.
In terms of, particularly if you're talking about motivation to lose weight, you would say people who don't have enough motivation to stay in the program may be motivationally different to the people who stay in the program. Yeah.
Obviously.
I think it would be fairly obvious that there is a difference in those. So yeah, it's a good point. They should have been more clear about that. Okay. Yeah.
I have one left actually. It's they are offered a free gaming console and like the Kinect and Xbox, and one part of the group get to use it right away, but the other one have to wait until the end, and they're like, okay, I'll just participate, and maybe this appeals to youth that don't have gaming consoles. I don't know. Maybe that has some effects to it, but I'm in the system, I'm participating. That you see the 75, maybe they only had 75 gaming consoles to share around. So you have like the 59 declined to participate. Is that true, or did they have just 75? I don't know.
Well, actually, they only allocated 34 to the active gaming thing. So I suppose eventually they might have been given out 75.
Yeah.
So.
So that's the thing, but so those who didn't get the console right away, how motivated are they? Because they increased like a little weight, there was really not much difference. You showed this part from week 8 here, so it looks like they're not motivated. So does it have to be that they just want to get the console at the end, or are they really interested in participating and doing a good job?
So as far as I can tell, they were allocating randomly, not by whole groups. So they didn't allocate a school to being the game group or not game group. So I think they're different individuals who may have known each other. Some would have got the game, and some, like, yes, the cross communication between participants.
But did you find something somewhere in the paper that people were aware, the second group were aware that they will have at the end this Connect?
No, it doesn't say in the report that they know, but it says that they get the console after the 16th week.
Okay.
So basically, for fairness reasons, they gave the console to everybody eventually.
It's I don't think that children and people participating in this survey and this program just to have a Connect at the end, because it's stupid. Yes.
Well,
and,
I mean, if you're signing
I
up,
think
and
that
when you sign
people
up for
with
the
such problems, obesity and overweight, they were. The program was not only gaming this. It, as I mentioned, it was also like writing, physical training, a lot of everything, and it's even like impossible not just to cover yourself with between. I mean. Not to participate in all other activities that this program provides. It's.
I would disagree with that, because I've seen enough students who, when you have compulsory attendance in class, will show up at the back of a class and sit there glaze-eyed and not listen to anything that's happening in the class. No matter how engaging I try to be as a lecturer, if I have compulsory attendance, there are going to be some people who are there just because they have to be there, and they don't learn anything because they're just there because they have to be, right? So there's dealing with how you frame the reward for participation is a challenge in this particular one, right? Because if they said, you sign up and you get this free, you get a free Xbox console, right? A lot of people
I didn't find
Yeah.
that they like were aware that.
Yeah, but if you signed up and you say we'll give you an Xbox console at the end of the thing, right? The people get it immediately, go, whoa, right? And people have to wait, go, oh yeah, I'm only here to get the Xbox console at the end, right? And for low income families, that for kids who couldn't possibly get an Xbox, that could be motivation enough to stay, right? The idea is that by both groups getting an Xbox console, you try and eliminate that particular difference, right? That they're both going to get the same reward, so it's not a reward motivator issue. But as far as I can tell, I couldn't see them saying where they managed the communication between individuals, right? Because if we go to the same school and we signed up for the same weight management program, right? And you got an Xbox and games to play, and I didn't. And I said, so how's the weight loss going? And you go, oh, it's so much fun, I get to play this game. And I go, I had to get these people talking at me all the time. That actually inter-subject communication could affect motivation, right? So, I mean, one way they try to compensate for this is you take, this entire school, we will give them the game, but we only give this school the game to try and decrease that communication. But it appears that they just kind of, randomly allocate it, irrespective of the location in which they recruited you, right? Which is kind of better, because, if you do it by school, you take a Midwest school and you take a California school or a low-income school and a high-income school, the whole value of Xbox matters a lot differently. So there are other problems when you do it by school rather than within a school. But then the communication can be a real problem, right? But as you said, you were saying that the all the rest of the program, well, for their activity levels, the rest of the program doesn't seem to have that much of a benefit. And it seems to benefit their weight loss because those are their BMI Z score. So that is, so, you know, they go from 216 down to 205. So they improve a little bit. But the baseline, the active group, improved a lot more, right? And as I said, doubled the weight loss when it was active group, right? Now, that would suggest that the actual kind of the talking at the kids didn't have that, you know, the fact that they just adding the game was able to double the effect of that would mean that one probably not very large, right? It's not like the most effect comes from the talking at the kids and then the games add a small effect on the end, right? It seems that, you know, the game were able to double it, so it's not that big an initial number. So how effective is their actual talking at the kids program? Doesn't seem that effective. But
Another thing that I got me thinking is that in week 9 they get presented with a new game, and they get probably more like new game. You tend to more motivated. If they stayed with the same game for 16 weeks, it would drastically And I don't know of the other group if they got something that
they didn't get anything
No.
in week 9.
so.
So it's just, you know, same as same old. But, you know, that what they do say, the dropout rate, though, was similar. So the 16-week dropout for both groups was a similar number. So the idea is that 9-week change of game didn't seem to increase the number of people who'd stayed in the program. It could have changed their motivation and kept them more motivated to do more and to keep going. But, the different having different control groups. I saw one study on homeopathy, right? So homeopathy, you guys all know what homeopathy is and isn't? You know what homeopathy is?
Yeah.
So some know what homeopathy is, some don't. Homeopathy is the idea that water has memory. And so what you do is, if you want to cure yourself of something, you dissolve a little bit of the thing in water, and then you take, you get a 100-litre container, and you take 1 drop of the water you dissolve the thing in and put it under the container, mix it up, you take 1 drop out of that 100-litre container and put it in another 100-litre container, and do that several times until you've got near enough to plain water as you can get. And then you give that to people, and the water has memory about what the old thing was, the poison or the toxin, and it will somehow cure you of your allergy to that or of the toxin. Generally accepted that this is not effective, right, from a scientific clinical trial point of view. But what is effective is if you bring people in and talk to them and do an analysis and spend time with them and kind of make them feel like that people are paying attention to them, right? Now, with the active video game, the fact that people came in at week 9, so this active group, this is a nice active control study, right? Because the complaint this paper had, one of the complaints it says it was trying to deal with the fact that they'd done the active gaming group with no control, right? With no general patient program control. And for active gaming group's great. And they say, well, you know, you wouldn't compare it to anything else, so of course it's better than not doing anything. So here they tried to pick out all the other activities of weight management and the active gaming, right? So they're trying to control for that engagement. But then they do the thing of giving them a new game in week 9, which is kind of, wait a minute, you're adding new motivations along the way. You're giving these guys an active game. If you'd given the other group a game console with non-active games, right? Why don't you give them the Xbox with games that are just sit in first-person shooting, right? That would have affected this whole motivational kind of, is it the game? Is it this promise of the game versus getting a game that is the difference, right? So, yeah, I think there are definitely some challenges in that area of this study. But in general, I mean, my general feeling is that they tried very hard to get this right, and they did. It actually measures BMI, so it doesn't just measure the intention to lose weight or how long you played. It actually measures a clinical relevant feature, which is BMI. So, and it has got a lot of good features in it. I just that motivation to continue is one of the challenges. Okay, so that was
it.
anything? So, from the audience, was there any thought on what you thought of this paper? Any criticisms from the other lecturers? Comments?
I have a question that can be answered, but so they are talking about the dropouts or the ones that they can have more than 3 valid monitoring days. So, I mean, are it 3 out of 16 days we're talking about? So, anyone that would have on the device more than 3 days out of 16 days, and so how big data set do they actually have?
Well, it's 3 consecutive. You need at least 3 consecutive days was what, as I read it. It was so you weren't just putting it on days that you were planning to be active. But yeah, 3 doesn't seem to be a particular.
Out of 16?
Out of 16.
So that means that you had 4. How many 4 had 4 days? How many had 5 days? It didn't say. So how big data set they actually have is a bit lacking.
And I have no idea because they don't want to drop too many, right?
Exactly.
So they probably looked at the data and picked the 3 possibly post hoc, right? They looked at it, how do we keep it? Like, we're going to lose some, right? You're going to lose some for not wearing the device. So at what point do you kick people out? Because if you said you had to wear it every day, right, you might find that 90% of people you'd have to drop out and you'd be down to like 3 people who wore it every day, right? So they must have kind of edged back that criteria and try and get a balance of keeping people in. But then you've got very patchy data.
That's the thing. And,
Yeah.
How that would influence the results. The other thing is, I mean, this.
It's almost certain that they've done it post hoc, so they kind of fine-tuned that number to
Get some data.
get the data that they were happy with. Yeah.
Or to get enough data they could make an analysis.
Yeah.
Yeah, the other thing I would like to see discussed is the whole game. I mean, they go from 25 to about 30 minutes active, and what should it be, and what is required for these guys to keep on that activity level once the gaming is over. That's the thing. So I think it's at 30 minutes per day active, maybe vigorously active is a lot.
No, that's actually the recommended World Health Organization
For maintaining.
for maintaining
Not
health.
improving
No,
health.
it's like for everybody.
Exactly.
That's an average for everybody, like between children and very old people. So that's very bare minimum, yeah, to maintain.
Yeah, this is not trying to lose weight.
No.
This is stopping from going worse. Is you're supposed to have that amount. So yeah.
And they even changed the directive from vigorous to you have to sweat, because vigorous was kind of a little bit
Ambiguous is
Yeah.
what we mean by moderate to vigorous versus vigorous activity. So vigorous physical activity. What is vigorous physical activity? So, there's also, I'm looking at some of the British studies on the effects of physical activity on weight loss and responsiveness. I've seen some recent studies showing that different people respond in different ways. Right? So there are super responders who you do a little bit of physical activity and you start moving into a kind of high burn, you lose a lot of weight quite quickly by doing physical activity. And there are others who just kind of compensate, right? When they do physical activity, their bodies completely compensate for it.
It it also depends on what food do you eat.
Yeah.
So, and this program included both these factors, food and physical activity. So
Yeah, they try.
it should be.
But the thing though is that, I mean, if you look at the C scores, if I'm not wrong, I think that the C score they use that for kids because they can use the regular BMI for kids because they are short. So the C score I think is kind of 2 standard deviations. That the 2 would be obese. If you're higher than 2, it's obese. So less than 2, you aren't obese anymore. So they have an improvement from 214 to 189. But I would think that they aren't happy stopping there. And what we know from weight, or if you want to increase the activity level to reduce weight, you will progressively need to be more active to continue losing more weight. Because it's easy to lose the first few pounds, and then it's getting harder and harder. And you need to really increase, not linearly, but a little bit more linearly, because your body adapts and tries to maintain whatever level you are at. So I mean, this is just starting point. Interesting to see. Okay, if you don't want to just get just under the obesity level, but really be fit, then there's much more maybe than refinements in doing so.
But for example, if you are sitting on a diet, you can, if it's strong diet, of course you lose weight faster. But I think it's more important to have like not strong diet, but like healthy lifestyle. It means also to include both these factors, food and physical activity. Of course, maybe loss of weight will take longer period of time, but it will not. But the situation, if you like stop the diet or stop doing something, you will have even more weight that you have before this diet. So it happens sometimes. So I think it's more important to have this long-term dietary, and it's more about lifestyle. It's not like a diet.
No, definitely.
Okay, so
But my major criticism here is that this is not interesting. Of course, if you're more active, you're gonna lose a little bit of weight, and you're gonna be and if the game is about being active, so the measure is that they are more active and they're lose more BMI. But that is kind of to be expected. That's the interesting question. The interesting question is, what will the game need to offer for the kids to continue play afterwards? Because I mean, if you're more active, you're more active. That's an interesting question to me. I mean, it's because we could play games and they're more active. Okay, yeah, it's fine.
And you can certainly look at, if you look at gameplay stats on things like the Wii and on the Kinect and people's use of the Kinect, when you first buy it, the use is relatively high for the first few months of having Kinect.
Yep.
Within a year, you don't get it out that much. Your lounge is no longer suited to it. Your novelty is worn off, right? So this is a big challenge here: is the 16-week period long enough to measure?
Yeah, they mentioned this in limitations that it's for this study is short.
Yeah, that's why I'm asking. So is it interesting study at all?
Does it tell us much that is useful?
That we already don't know. I mean, we already know it.
Yeah, we already know that novelty is going to be useful, that for a limited time you can have a novel intervention almost like of an physical activity, and they'll do it, they'll come along for a few weeks. And you see this basically every activity humans do, right? That is like, at the start of the season of climbing, there'll be more people than 6 weeks later, right?
More people signing up for the gyms in January than
Yes.
the end of the year.
Yeah, and for the first 6 weeks, there are more people going to the gym, and then by November, it's quiet again, right? So,
It's January, New resolutions.
yeah, so that boom and bust cycle is a real challenge for these short-term research papers. And one of the major problems, though, of course, is it requires a lot more funding to do long-term studies.
Mm.
And it means you don't get your publications out as quickly, which means you don't score the points as an academic, which means you slow your career down, which means you're not playing the game properly, right? You're not, and unfortunately, the way we've set up academic research generates more of this kind of paper than of the long-term study paper. Whereas realistically, we would like more of the long-term papers.
Okay, so this is the last session for us for presenting things. I think all of you have presented. Everybody here, as far as I can see, I remember each of you doing a presentation at some point. So my exam is quite late. It's the 18th of April. Okay, so I was wanting you guys to do a sort of 3 to 5 page summary of your particular area. So you can do on your particular areas in by the 11th of April, so that I can specialize my oral exam questions to your specialized area, right? Because there'll be a part of the exam which is your specialized area. The rest of the oral exam is across all the papers that we're covering. Okay. So we can also have a meeting sometime in that week beforehand. Just you can ask me some questions and reassure yourself about what's going to be in the exam and that sort of thing. Do you have any questions at this stage?
Would you like only about our paper or about?
Write the area that you're interested in answering questions about. Right. So if there are other papers you've read which you also found interesting, then you can include those in that area, right? And I'll scan over those as well and kind of think of relevant and interesting questions from that area, right? If you only give me the paper, then I may ask you questions about some of the area of that paper that might not be particularly well explained in that paper. But if you've read other things, then they're probably explained in the other paper. So good to give a wee bit more than just the one you've got. But you don't have to. Any other questions? Good luck tomorrow, those who are doing the exam tomorrow. I will be listening to you, sitting next to Marish. So hopefully you'll do great. Okay, see you guys.
Thank you.